Oop, wrong things. All right, good afternoon. We have one very brave soul who joined us on this probably first week of summer. But we are recording all of these resources to be able to share out. Oh, we have another one joining us. So before we get started, if you would like, please drop your name, your role, and your experience with Chat for Schools in the chat. The reason why is just to make sure that if you are not a current Chat for Schools user, that we can provide you with some access today to follow along with us. We are going to be hands-on creating in the platform and kind of experiencing our specialized tutors component. So make sure to just drop your name, role, and experience within the chat so we can make sure to provide you with the resources that you'll need to be successful today. And I'll make sure on my end to pull up a link to provide you with. All right. So we may have others trickling in, but I'll just jump on in to make sure we have enough time to get through what we have today and maybe even get done a little bit early. Um, so welcome to our webinar series. We will be doing a couple more of these throughout the summer. So if you really enjoy what you've learned today and you want some of your educators or really anyone to kind of experience what you're going to experience today, please feel free to spread the word. And we can get some more registrations and help our current users, but also anyone who's really exploring AI and support for staff and students. We will dive right on in. So first, I'll just introduce myself and Skillstruck. We will kind of just briefly discuss why our educators are loving our specialized tutors. And then we'll discuss some tips for success for creating super successful tutors. We've learned a lot from our current partners, a lot from current teachers, and just overall some ideas for really creating some impactful tutors for students. And then we're going to dive in and we'll do some step-by-step instructions and walk through a scenario and get comfortable with how this all is done. So before we get started, just want to introduce Skillstruck. So for those of you that are new or not a current Skillstruck partner, we have been partnering with schools since 2017. We started in the computer science space. So we are supporting well over 800 schools with computer science, K-12. We do have a Launchpad platform, which is for elementary school, and a secondary platform called Voyage. And really what we are helping schools do is have a sustainable pathway for K-12. Also really preparing students for middle school and high school with our elementary curriculum, moving students beyond block-based coding within elementary school into text-based prior to making that jump into middle and high school. So doing a lot of preparation that way to, again, just have a sustainable pathway for K-12. And with that, a lot of conversations began with our current partners about where do we go with AI. And so Chat for Schools was born. We've got a lot of states, a lot of partners on board with that already, a lot that are helping us learn. Again, what you're going to learn some things from them actually today with our specialized tutors. And so we've been around supporting schools since 2017 and really excited with this new adventure we're on with all of you with AI. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is this: why are specialized tutors so great, right? Because I'm really going to talk about how great they are today. And so a few reasons why our current partners and our team are loving our specialized tutors. One is because it really allows for some really simple personalization in the classroom, where you can set up your tutor to have different personas. You can truly help students master specific learning standards. So if you look at your class as a whole and you're like, my students are really struggling with creating a strong introduction to a piece of writing. Like you can really hone in on that. And so teachers know their students the best, right? And being able to have AI support that and for teachers to support the AI and generating really valuable resources is one way that these specialized tutors are super great. And I have a scenario today in which we'll kind of talk about that personalization. Another reason why our users are loving specialized tutors are because they've been great with increasing student engagement. And along with that, it's been really great to be able to engage students who don't ever seem to be engaged in the classroom in the first place. And so I'll kind of talk through a couple of use cases with this, but specifically, this has been great to really provide some insight to teachers on why your students aren't engaged in the classroom, but also provide students with an outlet to engage with AI and students to be or teachers to be able to see like even an inkling of one thing, right? So like we have students who teachers have told us haven't spoke all year long. They haven't done a piece of writing, they haven't done anything, they haven't spoken. And with our Chat for Schools environment, students started engaging with it and interacting with tutors and chat tools. And with our whole chat and tutor history logs, teachers were finally able to see some insight into what students are even thinking. And so that engagement piece has been huge. It also is able to like reduce some barriers in the classroom as well. One use case for that would be we had teachers who were running a Socratic seminar, and they often saw that students were skipping that day of class because they were not comfortable engaging in like a debate or sharing their opinions in the classroom. So they created a specialized tutor to have a Socratic seminar, and they were able to view students interacting with different personas. And we're actually able to provide students with a grade instead of providing them with, a makeup work or just an overall zero, because they were actually able to see them interacting, providing opinions, and debating with some different personas. So that engagement piece is huge. And finally, just some more structure. So when we're thinking about AI, a lot of people are coming to a place of teacher generation tools, right? Which is perfect. And we have those capabilities as well. Save teachers time, allow them resources to be able to quickly generate lesson plans, all those good things. Or they're like, okay, I'm a little intimidated by allowing students to interact with a chat tool because it's just going to provide them with answers or it's just going to finish their writing for them. And with our specialized tutors, we're able to add a little bit more structure to that experience for both teachers and students. And really, again, kind of hone in on specific learning standards to also put controls of don't finish their writing for them. Don't provide them with all of the answers. And so having a little bit of more structure in place has been super impactful with learning outcomes, but also just with reducing some fear among staff members. So we'll kind of explore a few of those things. Hopefully you'll see a little bit of that when we're hands-on in the platform today, and how all of those things really wrap up into our specialized tutors. Um, One thing that I just want to run through, and this is going to lead right into some of my tips for creating a really impactful specialized tutor. This is a use case from a current teacher. And this is just a really, again, kind of that engagement piece structure. Let's think of all those things I just mentioned. This is a specific example to go along with that. So a teacher, a technology teacher, created a video game pitch critic tutor. And this tutor really solved a couple of his issues. He was noticing, as we all probably do, right, that students were writing one draft, maybe it was even like 4 sentences and turning it in which he'd have to provide feedback on 30 plus of these video game pitches that were really not complete and provide students with feedback to go back, redo it, add more information, add more detail, and then turn it back in for that grade. And so creating this tutor is eliminating that first, like, I'm turning this in when it's not quite ready yet. And so this teacher created a tutor that took on a few different personas. So it took on a business marketing, how everything looked aesthetically, and then a technical component. And with those different personas working within the tutor, it was able to give students some robust feedback based on each of those points of view, and give students some ideas for improving their work before turning it in. And so what they were able to do was students, this is an actual example of this interaction. So that first one is the introduction from the tutor. Hey, I'm a video game pitch critic. Here's what we're going to be doing today. And then the student would enter, here's my game. It's an action adventure rhythm game, and gives the descriptions of their video game pitch. Then the tutor came back and it said, because the teacher set it up as like a grade system, like provide them a grade up to A. And so this was providing the student with a grade. So here's your initial grade, it would be a C. And here's the feedback from a business expert point of view, from an art and design expert point of view, and then that technical component. So with these pieces of feedback, and also with some of those probing questions that you see, then a student was able to go in, take into consideration this information, add it to their first pitch, and do some revisions prior to turning it in again. And for this video game pitch critic, it would keep looping feedback until it decided, okay, now this student could receive what they would deem an A on this project. And so again, this is one way, and we'll explore some of this today, but one way where you can have a lot of structure within students' interactions with AI, also engage students in this process of feedback, and save teachers time, right? Like, look at all this wonderful feedback AI can provide students without completing the work for them. And they're going to have a lot more robust feedback and able to make revisions, whereas a teacher doesn't have time, within 2 minutes to go visit every student in the classroom to provide them some feedback. And so this is just one use case, and we have more if you're curious about more of these. We had a whole show and tell, so we have tons from our current teachers that we can share with you. But this is just one way that we can really think about how this can be utilized in classrooms. And with that, I'll kind of walk through a couple of tips for creating these successful tutors that we've been learning. And we're going to put these tips into action while we get into the platform today and explore. So a few tips for creating, and you'll need to know this as we jump in, and I'm going to provide you with a scenario today, but if you are thinking through something different that would help your current staff members or your current students, like you can stray from my ideas today. But these are some general tips. So if you are straying, or if after today you want to go in and jump into some other ideas, these are my pieces of advice for you. Be intentional with the main goal of your tutor. So, don't just think, okay, my students need help with writing. Think about what specifically they need help with that writing. Or, like even that video game pitch, like what are you trying to eliminate? So for this teacher, it was trying to eliminate having unfinished work turned in. So is that your goal with the tutor? So really just sit down and think for a moment, what is the main goal for your tutor? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to make easier for teachers? What do you want to be super intentional with a tutor for students? My other piece of advice is to be specific with your subject or your topic. So provide different persona descriptions. That's what we're going to do today. So if you're like, I have no clue what that means, don't worry, we'll see that. And of course, utilize learning standards. So again, teachers know what their students need the best. And to really encourage the collaboration successfully between a teacher and AI, you need to really tap into, okay, AI is not taking over this learning experience. What do you know about your students, and what do they need support with? So really trying to think about pulling in specific learning standards or things that they may need. And this might be different among multiple groups of students in one classroom. And so that's something to consider as well. Attach helpful reference materials. We're also going to generate something like this with a rubric, but if you are able to attach helpful reference materials, or even maybe a PDF of your learning standards, those will all be working in the background of the tutor, and make it even more successful. Provide special instructions. If you don't want students getting feedback from like multiple different personas at once, or if you don't want the tutor to reply with answers, or if you want the tutor to really be encouraging, provide those special instructions. And then finally, engage in this preview mode, and you're going to see some of these things as we work. So some of these might be like, I have no clue what she's talking about, but don't worry. But engage in that preview mode prior to exporting. So there's the capability to generate the tutor and engage with it before students see it. And I really encourage that to make sure it is doing exactly what you are intending for it to do. So keep these things in mind. I'll probably bring these back up as we dive in to our experience. And with that, I'm going to provide you with a scenario, and then we're going to put all those tips into action, and we're going to explore how to create a successful tutor right within Chat for Schools with available resources within there. And so I'm really going to walk you through like how we can use a chat tool to make a tutor even better, how we can use a rubric generator to be working in the background. Because that idea that I shared with you about a video game pitch critic, that's a lot of information. And that may be really intimidating for a teacher to create. But with resources built in, they can create things like this based just off of the idea that they have. They don't have to come up with too many of their own, descriptions and things like that. So for today, I am going to walk through this scenario, and you can, again, if you're like, actually, I have something super great, I have a learning standard that I know students are struggling with in so-and-so's class, by all means. But here's what I'll be walking through today. You've just entered the narrative writing unit with your 6th grade students. Okay, perhaps you already had like a pre-assessment where they provided a piece of writing on a narrative piece, right off the bat. Perhaps they took a little pre-assessment quiz, whatever it may be, but you're kind of just getting started into this narrative writing unit for your 6th grade students. And you're exploring a creative way to engage students in mastering the standard. So the overarching standard of write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, relevant descriptive details, and well-structured event sequences. This is a Common Core state learning standard. So just pulling that from there. If this does not relate to your state, I'm sure you have something a little similar, right, with this writing component. But after you've read over, maybe that initial writing piece, or you went through maybe some quiz, or just based on your knowledge of students, you identified that your students are currently struggling with a couple of things within this overarching standard. And you've realized that they're struggling a bit with introducing their characters, organizing a sequence that makes sense. Okay, so that learning standard there, 6.3a. And you've also noticed that they're struggling with some dialogue and pacing and some descriptions. So they're really basic, there's not too much descriptive details in there, not a lot of event details, things like that. And so with that, you have decided that you want to engage students in a challenge to create a short story that'll be featured in a local or maybe even your school's newspaper. And so what you're going to do is you're like, okay, students are going to practice writing a narrative piece that's going to be featured in this newspaper. Okay, so that's our scenario. That's what we're going to try to accomplish today. And we'll discuss how we could accomplish this with our specialized tutors. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause for a moment. And for those of you that are not a current user, I'm going to drop a demo account link in the chat. And you are free to use that for today, or if you just want to sit back and relax and listen to the rest, that's completely fine as well. I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment because it's a little hard to navigate. So here is a demo account link. With that link, you're going to be able to create access to Chat for Schools for 2 weeks by simply just filling in your first and last name and your email. And then I will share with you how to navigate from there. All right. So hopefully your screen popped up in a blue screen. If not, because this happened yesterday, if not, there will be simply, and I'll kind of just share this just for reference. Hopefully it looks like this, but if not, you may see some other options. I encourage you to just find something with some stars that either says chat for schools or chat portal, and that will take you to that blue screen. So anything with a few stars, chat for schools or chat portal. Sometimes it comes up a little bit differently for demo accounts. But your goal is going to be to make it to this bright blue screen. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and let everyone just get settled. Feel free to ask in the chat or unmute if you're unable to get to where you need to be. And then we'll jump in and explore. All right. So we're going to do a few different things in here. We're going to visit our chat tool. We're going to visit our tutor creator, and we're going to visit our learning studio. Now, you are not going to have to take all of these steps in order to generate specialized tutors. But my goal today is to really walk through creating impactful tutors. So really thinking about these different personas, these specific learning standards within this scenario that I've provided you with, and really think through how you can provide a lot of structure to your tutors. So with that, I will first go through our tutor creator experience so we can get a little bit of feel for what we're filling out, and then we'll kind of go into these other different components. So where it says platforms, in order to visit our chat tools and to explore some tutors, you would enter this bright green button. But in order to go to our tutor creator, you'll select the tutor creator option. Now you may see, oh, I'm in a demo account here, so I'm actually going to go into my own. You may see there's two that are already generated in there, which is Taylor Swift and Harry Potter. Because who doesn't love Taylor Swift and Harry Potter? I'm actually not the biggest Harry Potter fan or Taylor Swift, but you know, you got to go with what the people want. But you'll see those auto-generated in there for you. Sorry, I'm just redoing my screen here because it logged me into a demo account environment and we need some of my things built into here. So, okay. So within that tutor creator, you're going to first see the ones that are generated. So again, you'll see two of those. You'll see some more here on my screen. So those are available ones that have been created. You're also able to share tutors with others. So when you're thinking about maybe you're a lead in your department and you want to generate some tutors for your teachers to use, right, to save them a little bit of time, you can always create tutors and share them with each other, in which those would appear here in shared tutors. But in order to create a new one, you're going to simply click New Tutor. Now on the left-hand side is where we're going to really be working to include some of the information and some of the structure that I've been mentioning. So these are the fields that we're going to create today. On a little bit of a side note, we are also going to be building within here more of a collaborative environment as well for teachers who are a little bit unsure how to go about building these. And so it'll kind of be like a chat tool where you'll say, I want to create a tutor for this topic, and kind of walks teachers through a little bit more of a step-by-step process. Because what we've noticed is for some, like this is a little intimidating, like we're not quite sure what to put in here. So just a little side note there. But what we're going to do today is we're going to provide our tutor with a name. Now, this is where you can select something like Harry Potter or Taylor Swift or a character that your students are super into or a celebrity. But you could also just provide it with something as simple as like a newspaper peer editor or different things like that. And so I'm going to take the spin of a newspaper editor because that's the scenario that I've provided today. So you'll provide your tutor with a name. You'll give it a subject or a topic. This is where you can put in learning standards. This is also where you can put in some of the information about different personas. And we're going to walk through some of that, which is why I'm not filling this out quite yet. You'll provide the tutor with a grade level, and then you'll be able to optionally add in any PDFs. So a rubric is what we're going to create today together, but this is where you could put in a PDF of learning standards, or even we've had some different partners starting to think about how we can use this in the fall. And they've even been uploading their like school handbook in there for staff and for students, and kind of tutoring through like, what are the rules? What are the rules of school this year? How about dress code? I'm sure that's a big option that, you need to walk through. And then special instructions is where you can provide some additional parameters for your tutor. And then finally, under that Socratic method, is you could check that box if you never want the tutor to provide an answer and only prompt students with questions. So that's really a preference on how you want that to be used with your students. But we're going to walk through a bit of this, and I'm going to jump around a little bit. So hopefully you'll become a little bit comfortable with how things are all operating here. But I want to maximize our resources to be able to create some impactful tutors. So if you visited the tutor creator section, you'll see your screen like this. I'm just going to ask that you go over to Skillstruck and you go back to this environment here with that bright blue screen. And from there, we're first going to go into our Chat for Schools portal. So you're going to select that green circle with that chat icon and just go into that educator version so you can kind of explore, what it looks like for a teacher and for a student. And that's going to open as a new tab, which is perfect because we're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit here. So within this interface, you're going to see lessons, chats, and eventually we're going to interact with this tutors component here. But we're going to interact with the chat right now. Our lessons, we have PD lessons for teachers. We have student-facing lessons to really teach them about AI, how to use it properly, all those good things. But what I want us to use the chat tool for is building in some structure for our tutor. So you can simply select new chat. And what I'm going to do even is I'm going to drop my sentence that I'm going to write in here in the chat just for time purposes. If you're like, I'm typing out my own thing, or if you want to type out everything I'm going to write, that's totally fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a little paragraph here to have the chat help me come up with some structure for my tutor. I'll drop this in the chat now. And what this statement says is create instructions for a tutor to assist students in this learning standard. Okay, wrote that in there right from the scenario that I mentioned before. We're writing narratives, all those good things. And then I attached also those 2 additional standards that I know that my students are struggling with. As I enter that information there, I'm going to enter that. And it is going to come up with some instructions for my tutor. So when you're thinking about, okay, we want to be creative, we want to add structure, maybe different personas, maybe critique work, provide feedback, but a teacher can't possibly come up with all that information in that short amount of time, right? So what this provided me with was my instructions. So greetings, student writers. I'm an editor of your local newspaper. We're going to focus on these effective storytelling techniques. Okay, so it is breaking down those learning standards. We're going to focus on engaging the reader. We need clear context. We're going to introduce our narrator and organize. Okay, next we're going to explore these narrative techniques and breaks it down that way. Remember, the goal is to craft a narrative and so on. So these are some great instructions that I'll be able to go right over and put into that tutor creator. Now, what I'll mention about this environment also is this is a really nice collaborative environment for a teacher. So if I'm a teacher and I read through this And I was like, okay, there's certain aspects here that maybe my students aren't struggling with. Like maybe they are organized, or after thinking it through further, I think I just want to focus on this beginning part. You can interact with the chat and say, actually, can we focus just on engaging the reader and so on. So you can always ask it to redo what it has first entered, right? First draft isn't always great. For time purposes today, I'm going to say it is great, and we'll just grab it from there. So what we can do here is we can copy this. So there's a simple copy button right up here up top. So right where the chat entered, you can click copy. You can also have that read to you if you wish. And we can go over into our tab. So remember I mentioned it, open a new tab. If you want to go back into the other one and reopen up that tutor creator and select a new tutor and get to that screen I kind of previewed with you earlier. We're going to give our tutor a name. We'll just say newspaper editor. Now, if you're like, actually want to put a certain character in charge of this or so on, feel free. And I'm just going to simply paste this in here. So here I have my subject or topic, and it's all filled in with that information that the chat tool provided me with. From there, I'm going to adjust the grade level. And then I also want to consider that I would like a rubric working in the background just to really help add even more structure and to really help master some of those components that I'm trying to pull from those learning standards. So again, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, so I apologize for that. But again, just really want to make you aware of the resources available in here for creating this. So I am going to go back to that blue screen. You can always just click generate as well if you're worried about your work kind of not saving. You could always click generate and then go back to the SkillStruck icon there. But what I'm going to do, since I have an extra tab open, I'm going to open that. So going back to that blue screen, there is what is called Learning Studio. And also this is completely optional. So if you're like, this is like way too much hopping around for June and I don't need to add the rubric, don't worry about it. What we just put in there for those instructions is going to be super powerful in itself. But within Learning Studio, we have some of those generation tools, right, that are great for teachers. And we have a rubric creator. And what I have within this rubric creator, I have my existing ones, but then I can create a new one. And I'm just going to provide, I want to make a newspaper editor rubric for narrative writing. Okay, provide that with an assignment title. And then I'm going to enter my assignment description. So students will be creating a short. And then within those standards or learning objectives, I'm going to put in those 3 that I'm working through. So that overarching standard and then those additional 3, and I'll pop these into the chat in case you're following along. Those 3 that I am working on. I'll provide a total points possible. Let's just say 20, and then I can generate a rubric. So this rubric will generate, and then I'll be able to download this as a PDF. So we'll just take a couple of seconds. So while that is generating, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. But you'll get a rubric exported. And so for this, it is going to be establishing the context, event sequence, and narrative techniques. So it's pulling some information from those standards to be able to work in the background here. And this is, of course, also a rubric that maybe a teacher would like to utilize for the piece of writing that students finally turn in after this interaction with the tutor. So it can kind of work as 2 different things. You can export that and then save that as a PDF. So you can export that, you can save that. Provide that a name. I have to be specific. I've got a lot of things on my desktop right now that need cleaning up. So yes, the rubric generator, any of the generation tools or the chat tools, you can use specific standards for your state. So it will pull in any standard that you are working with. So give it a try. If you want to use your more custom or your Florida standards, by all means, you can use that as well. So now that I have my rubric generated, I'm going back to that tutor creator. And I'm going to just attach that in there. I'm going to click attach PDF, grab that from my desktop, and we're going to have that hanging out in the background. So right now I have a tutor name, newspaper editor. I've got my subject or topic. So I've got all of this information here. Now, what you may notice is in this subject or topic, like it doesn't say the specific learning standard, but those instructions were generated by those learning standards in the chat. So, these questions, these prompting things, this information that the chat came up with, took those into consideration. But if you want to cover your basis and make sure, you could always just enter those learning standards there, like at the bottom. So if you wanted to go in and paste those 3 that I had working in there, just to be sure, always an option there. For special instructions, I'm just going to encourage students to practice their writing often and be encouraging. Now for me, I don't mind the tutor, especially when it comes to writing, to provide students just with some information. So I'm going to stay away from posing too many questions. The tutor is going to be posing a lot of questions just based on what our instructions came up with and the nature of the tutoring experience. So I'm just going to hold off and not create that method there. So I'm going to leave that unchecked. Once you have all of the information filled in on the left side, you can select generate. It'll just take a moment. And then we'll talk about another couple pieces here. So as this is generating, I just want to mention one thing that our partners really love about the tutoring experience as well is you'll have full insight. This does this to me sometime, but don't worry, it worked. If that did happen to you, my account's silly sometimes. If you just go back, it will be available within your tutors. So if it gave you a little error there, it should still be available for use. So what teachers are really loving about the tutoring experience is that you'll be provided with a full chat history. So you'll be able to view the entire student learning process. So you'll be able to view how they started, like their first few sentences of their narrative piece of writing. And then you'll be able to view like how that progressed. How did they respond to the feedback that was given from that tutor and so on? And I'll show you what that looks like. But you're able to really have some insight in how students are learning or even how they're navigating through the writing process. Which when we think about AI, initially there was a lot of concern about the writing process. And I think with a lot of these tools in place to provide structure and also that history to be able to really see some insight, a lot of those fears have dissipated a little bit. But what you'll see here on the right side is it's going to come up with this introduction. And then you can even preview with it. So I don't know where this idea is coming from, but we're going with it. So you can start to engage with that, send some messages with the tutor, and you'll be able to view what the tutor is responding with. So if you're like, actually, this isn't working as I intended, we can go back over on that left side, tweak some things and save that. And then of course, if it's great to go, you can click export. The other component here is you can also generate a formative assessment. So you can generate an assessment that's going to pull in from this subject or topic, and it will create a multiple choice quiz for students, along with one short answer question for them to kind of tell you how they're feeling about how they've learned the material. You can edit the questions, you can add your own answers, add your own questions, and so on. But then once that formative assessment is generated, it'll tie into that tutoring piece. Once everything is how you'd like it to be, and that formative assessment is optional. So if you're like, nah, no worries there. But what you can do is export that, and then you'll export that to your different sections. Now, as you're working in a demo account, those will automatically appear for you. So this step really in this environment isn't really that important. But if you are a Chat for Schools user, that of course is important to make sure that those tutors go where you would like them to be. So now that we've got this all set up, we can go on over back into the platform. So where you saw lesson chats tutors, you will want to visit that tutor component. And for your students, this will just appear for them in their tutors. So they will not see all of these. They will only see the ones that you desire them to see. So that will just appear there in their specialized tutors. But for an educator standpoint, you're able to view those different specialized tutors that you've created. Now, Taylor Swift and Harry Potter, you can't go edit just because those are just hanging out there in your demo accounts. But if you did go on and create an editor one, you'd be able to view that. So you can edit it right from this view, or you can tap into it. So this is editor Emily. What is my story idea? And then I can start to engage. Now that quiz there, you're going to see a progress bar. That quiz will not be unlocked until you've had a certain amount of interactions. So students will need to go back and forth a bit before they're unlocked with the quiz. Then they can take the quiz and then remain able to interact with the tutor. So just because they take a quiz doesn't mean that they have to stop their learning process. So this is coming on in. An alligator park sounds like it could make for a very exciting narrative. Let's dive in. And now it's really helping me think things through. Okay, let's think through the setting and time period. Now, if you're like, this is a lot of information for a student, feel free in those special instructions to say, like, keep it to one piece of feedback at a time and so on. So there's lots of ways that you can finagle that. Also, there's a lot of ways for students to be empowered with being able to interact with these different tools and saying, hey, could you shorten this for me? Right? Like we want to really build capacity among all users to be able to make sure they can get what they need from these tools in an appropriate manner. So this is how then you can start to engage. Students can start to develop their writing, receive feedback, and so on. So really, that's what I had for us today to really think about how we go in to our specialized tutor, how we can use other tools to make a super impactful tutor, and just that overall process. So again, within that tutor creator, being able to view previous tutors, provide them a name, subject or topic, grade level, other things that could be working in the background, like a rubric, and then special instructions. Now with that, you can really start to have that structured experience for students. But the last thing that I want to just show you briefly today is that chat history that I just mentioned. So a couple more things, and then we'll open it up for questions. But I encourage you to kind of explore some of these components. So under My Classroom, under Students, you're able to view your students, which we often roster with different integrations. So that's how that would be set up. But you're able to view that full chat history. Okay, so thinking about just the chat tool, which is what we use to come up with our instructions for the tutor, students have access to that as well, in which you'd be able to view an entire chat history, which they could be using with their narrative writing to help them brainstorm an idea for their narrative piece before they're interacting with their tutor or alongside, right? So if they're like, I actually have no clue where to get started with this, they're able to utilize that tool. But for teachers who are like, I'm not so sure about a chat tool, it's a little bit too open for them, like maybe it will finish their writing for them. What they can do is lock chat mode and unlock tutor mode, in which students would only be able to engage in a more structured experience with AI with the tutors. So that's just a couple of things to consider. But within this progress, then, there's going to be ways where teachers are able to view their tutors. So you're going to see a Taylor Swift and Harry Potter example in your account that goes along with those examples you saw. But you're able to view that entire history. So on the left-hand side, and again, this is just examples, right? But this is how it works. On the left side, you'll be able to view the full interaction with that tutor. And on the right, if there's a formative assessment attached, you'd be able to see how they performed. And so when you're thinking about watching students improve their writing or have some more insight on, okay, I see how they were having a good idea and they were starting to organize their work, but they're still not using any dialogue here. And I don't see any action, about dialogue with a tutor. Maybe I need to meet with a student to kind of help them through dialogue, right? So it does eliminate a little bit of work for a teacher to have to know what every student needs, but still provide them an opportunity to have insight and be able to create perhaps small groups and things like that with students. So that's how you'll be able to view that entire experience between the student and the tutor that you've created. So that was a lot of information. It was a lot of moving around. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If you have any questions or you missed any of those instructions, please feel free to unmute, ask how I got to someplace, ask any questions that you have, or put them in the chat. And I'm going to also put the slides from today in the chat because those do have some of those standards and that scenario in there. So if you're like, I really want to try it, but maybe you're in the car right now and you weren't able to be hands-on, I'll provide you with those resources. And then you have access for 2 weeks. You'll also have access to this recording, so you can revisit what we've talked about today, and how I got to where I was going. So again, feel free to drop any questions in the chat or unmute. Doesn't have to be specifically on what I showed today. Or if you gathered everything that you needed today, you are free to hop off and enjoy the rest of your day.